Welcome back, y'all, to our new podcast, The Light in My Shadow, sponsored by Jai Bhakti Yoga Foundation. The Light in My Shadow is a personal recovery journey through BPD, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, suicidal ideation, and complex trauma. I educate and share techniques and practices of Ayurveda and yoga to address mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health, highlighting the heavy issues hidden in the tissues. I realized that in order for me to change my life, to stop these patterns, I needed to stop feeling sorry for myself and start taking action to be the kind of person that I want to be with. I am your host, Christina. I share my story and open up with no filter about my personal struggles, challenges, and successes. I want to preface that I am not a doctor as of this date, but I am an Ayurvedic health consultant practicing freely in the city of New Orleans. Therefore, everything that I discuss in these episodes are suggestions from an Ayurvedic and yogic application that have been working for me and merely suggestions for you. You can learn more about my offerings at Jai Bhakti Yoga Foundation's website, jbyfnola.org, or follow me on Instagram and Facebook, or even subscribe on YouTube at jbyfnola. Thank you all for being here, for listening. It truly means a lot to me, more than you'll ever realize. If you would like to support the mission of bringing holistic resources to individuals in mental, emotional, and physical hardship, please share, rate, and review this podcast with them. Without further ado, let's get started. It's not about what's wrong with me. It's about what's wrong with them. Like, seriously. As much as I hate to say this, and as much as we hate the victim mentality, those of us with BPD, and I know I'm just speaking for myself, we struggle. We struggle with these patterns of abuse. We struggle with the patterns that we formed a bond to because it's normal. It's normal with this cycle, because it's something that started at childhood. So it's something that we've always known, we've always been accustomed to. Welcome back, y'all. So in this episode 4 of season 2, we're talking about relationships with borderlines, patterns that begin with emotional dysregulation. And like I had spoke about in the introduction, and how all of these things are now manifesting most likely from this childhood abuse that I've had and this trauma, and then how it now rolls itself into the space of emotional dysregulation, how it then rolls into relationships and the struggle within those relationships for me personally, and maybe in turn that might extend itself to the person that's interested in me or the partner currently involved, and whether or not they want to remain, and these are 7 types of romantic relationships that borderlines tend to fall into, and they're not healthy. So really consider, those of you that are on the same path and trajectory as myself, all of the red flags, and to include the red flags within yourself and what you are choosing to accept and what you are also willing to let go of. That there are no double standards when it comes to relationships. It needs to be equal, it needs to be respectful, and they need to be healthy. These are the 7 types of romantic relationships that borderlines and their partners fall into. And these are emotionally abusive relationships, so that you understand. The first one is one partner abuses and the other one doesn't. The second is one partner began abusing the other and the other partner chose to retaliate. The third one is from the beginning of the relationship, both partners emotionally abused each other. The fourth, that it is not clear who's abusing who. The fifth one is one partner sets up the other partner to become emotionally abusive towards them. The sixth is that one or both partners is emotionally abusive due to mental illness or a personality disorder. And the last one is that one or both partners are emotionally abusive. And if you remember in a couple episodes before, we talked about emotional abuse, and then we talked about emotional abusive behaviors. They're two separate things, but they equate to the whole. One of my favorites when it comes to borderline personality disorder, and when they talk about all of our qualities, all of the ways that we are, and what makes us so developmental, is hypersensitivity. And it's like a developmental radar system that picks up any comment or action from others that could be interpreted as being negative, because we are so used to criticism and disapproval or negative judgments and abandonment. We often hear these types of comments from others even when they aren't being expressed, and then we act accordingly, often in the extreme. I know I'm not talking about myself only here. Those of you that are sharing in the same circle have the same reaction and response. So this is where we're working on together to start regressing these types of behaviors. It's part of our conditioning. So it really takes a lot to break these old patterns. It takes time and patience. Something I also wrote was that emotional dysregulation plays a role in relationship quality and overall satisfaction. It can be difficult for emotionally dysregulated individuals to maintain healthy relationships. And this is why people who struggle with emotional dysregulation often externalize, some internalize it, or they'll disassociate when exposed to stressors. This is something I do often, I know, and it begins with externalization. I'll talk about it with close friends. I'll beat it to a pulp, trying to figure out what happened. I'll internalize it and replay it over and over and over again, just trying to seek a solution. And then I'll disassociate once I begin to see the stressors and just like start to form a protective wall. This is where I will either start to retreat and back away, or ghost somebody, I guess is the new phrase, where you just take some time for yourself and you just don't, you go off radar. So I'm fucking guilty for that. Like, that's my thing. That's my poor ability to sustain my behaviors and boundaries. And, you know, it's been really a challenge for me. These feelings are feelings, they're superficial, but at the same time, they're a manifestation from what's going on within, right? So they're accompanied by support seeking behaviors. And this is the part I know some of us share an alignment to when it comes to this part of this emotional imbalance. I hate the word dysregulation because I feel that it's so hurtful in a way. It just makes you feel like you're something wrong with you, but there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong, right? It's just, this is the part that hit hard for me. So according to the research that I found and what I'm going to share with you, in a nonviolent context, insecurely attached individuals may seek to satisfy their need for connection or to resolve relational issues with sex. Communication can also be hindered, as emotional dysregulation has been linked to an inability to express oneself in sexual situations. This can lead to victimization as well as further sexual difficulties. Thus, the ability to both recognize emotions and express negative emotions are important for communication and social adjustment, including with sexual contexts. I say this for a couple reasons. One, this is where boundaries are super important, something I've had to revisit and get more firm on, you know, um, especially like with love languages and just being able to honor and respect and value myself just as much as the other person, because you don't want to be gaslit. You don't want someone to be inconsistent with their behaviors, so how they approach you and how they um, kind of get you wrapped up in their their way of being. You're so used to now a new pattern and a new behavior that was so uplifting, and then it went from one extreme to another so quickly. That is really hard for borderlines. Other things could be affection. If you're used to holding someone's hand and they withdraw, if you start to notice the withdrawal of affection, the withdrawal of attention, that can be jarring as well. Really, the cold shoulder, things of that nature really are, although superficial on the surface level for borderlines, those are the main areas that they crave the most. Remember, a lot of us come from trauma of lack of attention, affection, care, emotion. We come from the areas of abandonment. We come from areas of being taken advantage of on multiple times. These are cycles and patterns that we've gotten accustomed to. So when we find somebody that brings into our space a light that is so different than what we were used to, and they are consistent for quite some time until they stop and revert, that's like the huge no-go blow right there for us. That's like full protection mode. And now the trust barrier is like down here again. I digress. Communication is huge for everybody, and especially for those of us that have these areas of opportunity of growth, because it establishes a balance, but it also establishes like those boundaries where, like, hey, like, you have your life, I have my life. I'm still working through a lot of my own progresses and securities and insecurities. So being upfront with your partner in the beginning that what you have is very important, because you don't want to lose a great person because you're self-sabotaging, or you're pushing them away because you're getting consumed or caught up in an ideal of, or an idea of what you think you are, and you're not. You are not your dis-ease. You are not a borderline. You are a person that is experiencing life very differently based on the subjective experiences that you've had that have been quite traumatic for yourself. And at this point in your life, you are just seeking to find companionship that's going to be supportive and uplifting and progressive versus regressive and overbearing and controlling, because you need to have that freedom as well to really discover and evolve. And even better when you have the freedom with someone to explore and evolve as a whole, as a unit, because you are both still so open to everything new and fresh and growth together. That's like a true partnership. Emotional dysregulation really, it increases the instances of perceived criticisms. It contributes to the physical and the psychological violence within ourselves. It worsens our depression, that pragya aparad that we're going to get really into starting really soon. with Ayurveda and how that ignorance of the intellect is consuming to someone like us, like me, and brings us down into to a point of anxiety and sexual difficulties. I lost my marriage because of it at one point because I just wasn't even interested at all. I could care less. I could care less about having any type of physical intimate connection with my husband because I just no longer cared. I did not care for it. And that was in my head, whatever I started going through at that time, and it started to compound itself. And I would consume myself in something else. I just had to disassociate altogether. And that was even more detrimental. Dysregulation has also been observed to lower empathy and decrease relationship satisfaction, quality, and intimacy, just like I talked about. Emotional dysregulation tends to present as emotional responses that may seem excessive compared to the situation. We might be hyper sensitive about something that's not even that big of a deal because we just overreact. Individuals with emotional dysregulation, we may have difficulty calming down a lot of the time. I know for me, I do. It takes me a good minute or two to calm down. It takes me a minute to also avoid difficult feelings or to like focus on the negative. And I focus on the negative for a good like week sometimes. Other times I'm like focusing on the negative for maybe an hour. Sometimes it's like, whatever, you know, it's really weird. But for the most part, calming down, if it hasn't been for my TM practice, it would take me way longer to calm down than it does now. But I'm also Puerto Rican Italian and I have a fire. So, of course, when I get upset, I'm upset. I'm upset. So, and that has nothing to do with emotional dysregulation. That's just culture. Okay. This is so true. So, it's been my downfall, in all honesty. It's been my downfall, these difficult feelings, the negative mindset, going back and forth with Pragya Parad, and really getting into Ayurveda and getting into diet lifestyle routine, more into my practice of yoga versus working on yoga, but being in the practice of yoga has truly been super helpful in bringing me up and uplifting me out of these dark areas that have really created some not so good outcomes. I wrote this down here, and I hate to say it, but my downfall for every relationship, because as soon as the bullshit starts and I address it, even if I address it over 4 or 5 times and it still remains the same, I will start to dwell on the negative feelings instead of address the issue. On average, women tend to score higher on scales of emotional reactivity than men. And well, makes sense because we're very emotional creatures. But there was a study at the College of Ireland that found that dysregulation correlates to negative feelings about one's ability to cope with emotions and rumination in adults. They also found that dysregulation to be common in a sample of individuals and not affected by mental disorders. So that means this shit happens to everybody, not just us. Okay. So I'm going to give you a movie to watch. This is something that I watched when I was in Montana. And I thought it was a really interesting study on emotional dysregulation. This movie's called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Some of you may have heard of it before. You can find it on YouTube, and I'm also going to share it in the show notes below. So going back to how emotional dysregulation fucks up the relationships for us that have borderline personality disorder, what I've been working on doing to help myself with this shit is this little tiny little itty bitty laundry list. And I'm really hoping that what I'm sharing today is going to help you with your relationships, and not just a relationship with your partner. I'm talking about the relationship with yourself, you know? Like, really, Maharishi says it the best. One can only be to others to the extent that one can be to themselves only. So if we're not taking care of ourselves, and we're not falling in love with ourselves, and we're not being able to take ourselves out and be our own best friend and date ourselves, then quite honestly, how are we going to be able to have any type of laundry list of boundaries that we're going to create of what we want and what we don't want, so that we can honor not only ourselves, but that of whom we are attracting and bringing in? It's going to be a beautiful balance once we are finding that healthy balance and that elegance within ourselves. So, the first of which I've been doing, and these are my top 10. These are my top 10, and they're my top 10. So, if you want them to be your top 10, then you can do them too. Write these down, get a pen, mental jot it down, mental note it, but these are the top 10. Ready? Number 1, refocus on what is causing me so much pain. Journal and spend time meditating on this. Journal and spend time meditating on this. Number 2, once we know the cause, the hardest part is removing it. If it's a person, cease communication, send your closing message, and be done with it. If it's a circumstance, figure out what your solutions are going to be, make your little goals, start making your little tiny steps to get there. And then once you're there, be done with it. Number 3, have a support group to help when times are hard. Who are your people? Who do you rely on? Who can you call to vent to? Who can support you and uplift you and be like, babe, it's going to be okay. My buddy, my friend, I love you. You're great. Just who can you talk to like that? Who can you share with that's not going to judge you? Who can be your ear? Number 4, know that you will backslide and be patient with yourself. You are going to have your moments. Like when I see people having their breakdowns, let me tell you, I'm one bad day or one small trigger away from having my own. So be compassionate when you backslide. Number 5, remember why I don't deserve to be treated that way. Remember why I don't deserve to talk to myself that way. Number 6, recommit to your boundaries, recommit to your schedule, recommit to what makes you happy, what makes you tick. Number 7, begin a new hobby. So if you haven't already, try something new. For me, I'm learning Italian. I'm like obsessed with Duolingo. Belly dancing and Italian. I'm learning Italian and belly dancing. That's my jam. Maybe for somebody, it's yoga. For others, it's integrating meditation into your practice. For others, it could be learning how to cook or doing something that's going to enrich you and maybe give you some inspiration to do research or to go down the rabbit hole of learning about your ancestry, like someone has inspired me to do in my life, and go down the rabbit hole of Italian roots and heritage. So really give yourself that time, number 7, to begin a new hobby and learn something new. Number 8 is revamp your schedule to avoid confrontations or conflicts from former relations. If you work out at the same gym, if you go to the same yoga studio, if you shop in the same areas, maybe it's time to change up your routine. Give yourself an opportunity to find a new store, go to a different part of town. This is a really great way to not be predictable. This is your opportunity to revamp. So take that time to do so. This will also include integrating your new hobby into this practice. And the other thing, the last two, number 9, check your food intake and notice what your digestion is like and the way it is. For example, energy and stress will heavily impact this area, big time. If you're highly stressed and you're Vata in Ayurveda, someone that's very airy and spacious, chances are you're not eating or you're not eating enough. And if you're eating salad and you're a Vata dosha, we're going to have a talk because you're adding more air and space into your body. So you're aggravating yourself more. So you're getting more and more airy and spacious. If you are a Pitta and you're not eating enough food, your digestion is going to be really tikshna. It's going to be very, you can see a lot of yellow coming out of this experience. You're also going to have a lot of indigestion, maybe some upward movements, apana. And so it's going to be, you're going to feel full and you're going to be starving to the death. And then you're going to eat everything and then you're going to have a tummy ache. And then the kapha is very heavy and slow to process, and they probably have a loss of appetite as well, and they probably won't eat as much, or they'll just crave sweets. And so these are 3 areas to really observe your behaviors when you're stressed out and how you're responding and reacting, because it's going to impact your digestion. It's going to impact the way that you eat, sleep, your activities, everything. So once you're in number 9 mode, this is where you got to be the most attentive. Notice what's causing you the most stress. And this is where you got to pluck it out. Like, figure out a way, if it's work, which I myself have experienced myself, get there earlier so that you can avoid conflict, so you can find peace. Peace is priceless. Maintain that. Last but not least, number 10, get sleep. Get enough sleep. Get enough sleep. I know I'm guilty of not getting enough sleep sometimes, but anywhere between 5 to 8 hours, I need 5 hours minimum. Like, that's my jam. If I go over 5 hours, I could feel a little bit more tired, but 5 hours for me is on point. For others, it's something else. Invite meditation into your practice if you haven't started already. And even if you do like 5 minutes of stretching or yoga, it's better than no minutes. Sun salutation A, I can even drop a video for you here. I'll share, as a matter of fact, that's what I'll do. I'll share a video for you guys. So relationships are not one-sided, okay? Both need to contribute. It takes hard work. It really does. To keep a garden flourishing, it takes hard work. The grass is not always greener on the other side, even if you think it is. Why do you think it is? Because they're taking care of it. So if you take care of your grass is going to look just like that. So be mindful. One needs to till the soil, and they need to weed, and they need to replant. And again, nourish, nourish, nourish. What you put into it is what you get out of it. Plain and simple. Number 1, let's refocus on what is causing me so much pain. Just journal about that, okay? The first thing to do is not go into your victim mentality, all right? Eleanor Parjon, she once said that the events of childhood, they don't pass. They repeat themselves like seasons of the year. We can develop certain unhealthy patterns or behaviors at an early age. We can also change these patterns that can follow us all our lives. Until we begin to undo them and interrupt them and trade them in for healthier ones, we're never going to end up seeing a resolve. So I'd like to present an exercise. What I just talked about And then the following are a list of different types of abuse from our childhood that we may have experienced. In the next episode, I'll go into them more, but these are the top 10. And maybe as you're going into your journaling, these are going to come up for you and you'll be able to expand upon these more. In the next episode, we're going to work through all of these together. It might be like an hour long, that next episode, but just because we're going to go through some stuff, we're going to go through some shit, I know, but that's the intention behind this podcast, is to therapeutically work together through it, because I don't have a therapist right now because they continue to blow me off, and I get it. It's Louisiana. That's my shade. But at the same time, my bad. And I'm here to work on myself just as much as I'm here to work with you guys. So I'm going to cry with you, and I'm going to laugh with you, and I'm going to laugh at myself and my fucking dark ass humor and not giving a fuck about anything, but fucking giving a fuck about everything kind of thing. So, like, I digress. Number 1, physical neglect. Number 2, emotional neglect or deprivation. I mean, can we just keep checking the boxes off? Here we go. Number 3, physical abandonment. Number 4, verbal abuse. Number 5, boundary violation. Number 6, emotional sexual abuse. Number 7, role reversal. Number 8, chaotic abuse. Number 9, social abuse. And number 10, intellectual abuse. All these forms of abuse contribute to the onset of emotional dysregulation, which again leads to depression, anxiety, and a slew of other psychological and emotional disorders. Not just borderline personality disorder, y'all. This is other emotional disorders as well, not just us. It's going to be super hard, like I said. And it's going to continue to be hard because we're getting real, and we're getting more real each time. So this is the part, like in every episode, where we grow the fuck up and we're going to make these conscious shifts to improve ourselves. It's not going to be easy. Dr. Urbina, who happens to be my best friend, says that boundaries are crucial for any relationship. It needs to be established from the jump. There are no second and third and fourth chances. At that point, it's like a little kid trying to get away with all their shit after you reprimand them. There should be no second time, especially those that are in the 40 and up age range. At that point, they know what they are doing intentionally. So I'll leave us with this quote and a little homework. Dr. Engle says, "The repetition compulsive cycle, an unconscious drive to repeat the same type of abusive relationship we experienced as a child in an attempt to accomplish a new outcome. As Judith Vorst said," she's the author of Necessary Losses, "whom we love and how we love are revivals, unconscious revivals of early experiences, even when revivals bring us pain. We will act out the same old tragedies unless awareness and insight intervene. We will act out the same old tragedies unless awareness and insight intervene." So what's our homework? Our patterns may take different forms, but ultimately the source of the pattern is the same. Unless and until we become aware of the source of our pattern, we are destined to repeat it and over throughout our lifetimes. So let's go back to the list of emotional abuse from our childhood. Reflect on the various sources that contribute to the root of your trauma. Journal or recount how you wish what memories come up for you during this process. As painful and hard as it will be to face some hard truths. You're going to reflect on your current relationship and ask, is this serving both of us? Is it serving me? Or is it one-sided? What are the patterns you see in your partner? And write those down. And what are the patterns you see in yourself? And write those down. And then lastly, what is the first thing you will commit to in order to begin tending to your garden? Remember, it's not what's wrong with you, as Bailey says. It's what's wrong with them. Take this time to work on yourself. What I've been learning to do once I learned the root of my behaviors is to learn how I finish the unfinished business, or the karma that has been created through these patterns of unhealthy behaviors from my childhood. There are going to be instances where some paths are going to look very familiar, and we know how to navigate that now. As Renda Ryder once said, your comfort zone will kill you. So here are some recommended films, like I had said before. You can find them on YouTube or Amazon. The first one is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? The second one is What's Love Got to Do with It? It's the 1993 one with Tina Turner. It's about control and domination. And then the 1940s film Gaslighting. And when it comes to books, I recommend Necessary Losses by Judith Viorst, and that's the 1986 publication. And then I have a laundry list of resources for you, along with the Sun Salutation A video that I am going to share with you all in the show notes. So have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope that this episode explains quite a bit and sheds some light on some of the things that you've been struggling with. All right. So namaste, y'all. Be well. And I'll catch you in the next episode. So I want to thank you for showing up for yourself as well, for your loved one, if you're listening. It means so much to me that you took the time to do this. I want to invite you to join my community. If you've listened this far and like what you've heard, you can reach out to me personally at Jaya Bhakti Yoga at any of those platforms on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and email jayabhaktiyoga@gmail.com. Also, please do share this podcast, rate this podcast, review it, and please do continue to support by sharing it with your community so we can provide holistic care to our loved ones. And as always, I'm Christina, so much love, your host of The Light in My Shadow, and I will see you in the next episode. Namaste, and be well.